Everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Today we are going to look at different items that you would find in your kitchen. So we are going to try and label these different items. So please try and label them with me. You can also try and answer before I do. And yeah, let's get started. So first we'll be looking at cutlery and tableware. We have the different names of these items at the top. So this is our word bank. So let's get started with our first object right here. We call this a fork. Fork. Our next object, this is a, I'll give you a few seconds to figure it out. Okay, this is a napkin. Excellent. And our next object is a few seconds. Okay, I think you got it. This is a bowl. Perfect. Number 4, right at the bottom, we're looking at this smaller spoon right here. So this small spoon, we call it a teaspoon. Teaspoon. And the next object, we're looking at the bigger spoon right here, and we call this a tablespoon. Tablespoon. Perfect. And moving on to number 6, this is a glass. A glass. Perfect. Okay, so let me know in the comments how many of these you got right. Let's move on to our next slide. Okay, so number 7, right at the top, right here, we call this a knife. Knife. Remember, the K is silent, so you don't really hear this K. It's almost like you're just saying knife. So please remember that with the pronunciation. Knife. Okay. Number 8. This is a cup. A cup. And sometimes we also call it a mug. Mug. But you'll be safe if you just say cup. So next, number 9. This is a plate. Plate. Perfect. So I wonder how many of these you got right. Remember to let me know in the comments. And now we're going to do an exercise of filling in the blanks. So we have our word bank right here, and we have to fill in all of these blanks with the correct answer. So let's get started. Number 1 says, she eats spaghetti with a, the correct answer is fork, with a fork. Perfect. Number 2, he uses a to cut the cake. So we would say he uses a knife to cut the cake. And number 3, they use to wipe their hand after they eat. So the perfect word to use would be napkins. They use napkins to wipe their hands. Excellent. And number 4, can I have a of coffee, please? The best word to use is cup. Can I have a cup of coffee, please? And number 5, may I have a of water? So we would say, may I have a glass of water? Perfect. And number 6, he eats soup with a spoon. He eats soup with a spoon. And number 7, he stirred the coffee with a until the sugar dissolved completely. So, do you think we should say a fork or a teaspoon? What do you think? I hope you said teaspoon. If you did, then you are correct. He stirred the coffee with a teaspoon. And number 8, she poured the hot soup in a bowl. She poured the hot soup in a bowl and placed a loaf of bread on a, what do you think? Should we say on a glass or on a plate? I hope you said a plate. If you did, then you are correct. Okay, perfect. All of our sentences are complete. Let's move on to our next slide. Okay, so now we'll be labeling more of these kitchen items. We have a new word bank, so there are new words. So let's start with number 1. So this object, we call it a spatula. Spatula. And number 2, I'll give you a few seconds to think about this. Okay, I hope you said whisk. This is a whisk. And our next one, we can see that we're using it right here to flatten out this dough. So we call this a rolling pin. Rolling pin. Perfect. And off to the bottom, we would call this a pot. Pot. Our next item, I'll give you a few minutes to think about it. Should we say a can opener or does this look like a peeler? What do you think? Okay, I hope you said peeler. If you did, then you are correct. And our last item here, we call this a cutting board. Cutting board. Okay, once again, please let me know in the comments how many of these you got right. And now let's move on to our next slide. Okay, so let's start with this item here. We call this a grater. A grater. So we can see this man in the picture here. We would say he is grating the cheese. Grating the cheese. Okay. And our next item, we call this a ladle. Ladle. And the next item is a casserole dish. Casserole dish. Okay, so let's start here. What do you think? Is this a pan or a roasting pan? It's quite it's quite easy. I hope you said roasting pan. That would be like the most specific answer. A roasting pan. Okay. And our next item, these are tongs. Tongs. And the last one, I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. What do you think we call this? Okay, I hope you said pan. If you did, then you are correct. Okay, perfect. So now we'll be looking at the different appliances that you could find in your kitchen. So our first appliance here, we call this a dishwasher. Dishwasher. And our next appliance, I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. What do you think we call this? Okay, I hope you said blender. If you did, then you are correct. And our next item here. So, do we call this a fridge or an air fryer? What do you think? If you said air fryer, then you are correct. This is an air fryer. And our last item here, we call this an oven. An oven. Okay, perfect. Please let me know how many of these did you get right? Um, are any of these words new to you? Have you seen these words before? Or like, is everything really surprising you right now? Um, okay, let's keep going. Let's move on to our next slide. So, with our first object, we call this a kettle. Kettle. And our next object, I'll give you a few seconds to think about this. What do you think we call this? You can tell me in the comments, or you could just say it out loud where you are. Okay, I hope you chose microwave. Microwave is the answer. And our next object, we call this a mixer. Mixer. Up next, I'll give you a few seconds. What do you think we call this? Okay, I hope you said toaster. If you did, then you are correct. And our final item here, Well, you could say refrigerator, or that's a really long word. So fridge is just as good. You can just call it a fridge. Okay. Okay, so we are done. Thank you so much for joining me on this live. I hope you learned something new, and this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day or a wonderful evening.